Welcome to the National Center for the Middle Market webinar, COVID and the Middle Market, How Companies Are Shifting Focus During the Pandemic. My name is Doug Farron, Managing Director of the National Center for the Middle Market, located at The Ohio State University Fisher College of Business. The center, founded in 2011 and currently sponsored by Chubb, exists to ensure that mid-sized companies are recognized for their vital contribution to the U.S. economy. We do this by providing content, supporting networks, and programming to support their continued growth. We are excited to be joined today by three middle market CEOs from different industries and different parts of the country to share their perspectives on the business impact, challenges, and road to recovery for their respective organizations. Just some housekeeping. If you would like to submit a question to the panelists, please do so using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will try to field questions as time permits at the end of the session. In addition, a recording of this session will be available for on-demand viewing at our website, www.middlemarketcenter.org. I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for today's discussion, Thomas A. Stewart. Tom is the Executive Director of the National Center for the Middle Market. Before joining the center, Tom served as Chief Marketing and Knowledge Officer for international consulting firm Booz & Company, now called Strategy & Prior to that, he was for 6 years the Editor and Managing Director of Harvard Business Review, and earlier served on the board of editors of Fortune magazine. A 12-time participant in the World Economic Forum, he's the author of 3 books, Intellectual Capital, The Wealth of Organizations, The Wealth of Knowledge, and Woo, Wow, and Win, Service Design, Strategy, and the Art of Customer Delight with co-author Patricia O'Connell. Tom?
Thank you, Doug, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm really delighted to be able to talk to you, and to be able to bring to you and for this discussion 3 gentlemen who run extraordinary organizations and are trying to run them in what we all know is extraordinary times. Cameron Mitchell is the founder and CEO of Cameron Mitchell Restaurants. It's a family of restaurants, some individual standalone restaurants, some chain restaurants, mostly fine dining establishments. Cameron Mitchell is headquartered in Columbus. The restaurants are across the country, but mostly in the middle of the country, mostly in the Midwest and around in Ohio. Kevin Lackey, the founder and CEO of Freedom Powersports. Kevin is a Texan in Dallas, and Freedom Powersports presents and sells off-road vehicles, sport vehicles. Kevin will tell you all the detail of his product line as he gets into it. Michael Araten is the president and CEO of Sterling Drive Ventures, a group of companies that include plastic manufacturers and other companies in that area. And he is headquartered and operated just in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So I'm going to give them each a moment just to say hi and describe a little bit about his business, and then we'll move on to the business of this webinar. So Cameron, will you sort of give the 30-second tour first?
Sure, thanks, Tom. I have Cameron Mitchell Restaurants is composed of 62 restaurants across the country. We have 16 different brands. Our national brand is Ocean Prime, which is coast to coast, LA to New York City and in between. And then we have another small brand called Rusty Bucket Tavern. We have 23 of those restaurants in 5 states and about 14 other brands constituting about another 21 restaurants. We have a total of about 4,500 people in our company, and the company's 27 years old.
Thank you. And I mentioned to Cameron when we had our prep call on this that Cameron has been responsible for a large number of charges on my credit card over the years. I'm very happy it is indeed. Kevin, tell us a little bit about Freedom Powersports.
Sure. My name is Kevin Lackey, the founder and CEO of Freedom Powersports. We have dealerships in Texas, Georgia, Alabama. We carry brands such as Polaris, BRP, BMW, Yamaha, Suzuki. We sell all the different fun vehicles that people are actually out getting on and social distancing on right now. I've been I founded Freedom Powersports in 2012, and I started working in the powersports industry in 1999, and privately owned, and we have about 350 employees, and just right there bumping along the $200 million revenue mark.
Thank you, Kevin. And I have to say, I'm not a big motorcyclist, Kevin, but every time I've ridden on a motorcycle, it has not been socially distanced because I'm in the backseat hanging on for somebody for dear life.
We'll get you on a jet ski or something.
And then we'll be good. Michael.
Sure. We're a third generation family business, primarily focused in plastics, injection molding, and the building products business. We mold about 10 billion unique parts a year. And we, in the current environment, are deemed a life essential business in Pennsylvania, and so are running at about 70% capacity. We serve a variety of industries, from food and beverage to construction to the toy business. We manufacture the Building Toy Connects, which was invented actually by my father-in-law in the 90s. We've been doing that for about 30 years. So we've seen a lot of ups and downs in the economy, and we're obviously, as we're going to talk about in a minute, looking to battle through this one.
And Kevin, Michael, I should add, is also the chairman of the Middle Market Action Team of the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, a really remarkable group of companies inside the chamber that focus on mid-sized companies, which is where we're focusing on now. So Kevin can, I keep confusing you guys. So Michael can also speak a little bit about what he sees from that perch in the Philadelphia Chamber. So let me tell you a little bit about some research we did, and then really turn the field over to these guys who are going to talk about how they are experiencing, reacting, and responding to the COVID epidemic. In the end of March, just after the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic, we went out into the field and surveyed 260 executives of U.S. middle market companies to ask them about the impact. We got their data back March 23rd to 25th, so it's now 4 weeks old. At the companies that we talked to were also companies whom we had surveyed 3 months before in December in the course of our middle market indicator. So we are able to get some before and after comparisons, some what they were looking at in December as 2019 was wrapping up and 2020 was opening, and then what they were seeing in those first urgent moments when cities and states were closing down, bringing people in, and the COVID epidemic was really very much on the upswing. So we were able to talk about them. The results of that are on our website, which, as Doug mentioned, is middlemarketcenter.org, and we'll be able to talk about them a little bit. What we really want to talk now is about what these guys see in their life. But let me begin with a couple of key findings, and we'll let people respond. The first thing we asked was, what is the impact of COVID-19 on your business? And the immediate impact we saw was negative for most and catastrophic for some. 25% said that COVID-19 would prove catastrophic for their business. And as you can see, the numbers that said there was very little impact or sort of not much impact was pretty low. It was about 75% that said that there was going to be a pretty high impact and it was going to be a bad one. As to where, what was interesting is that 51% said that the biggest challenge they had was ongoing uncertainty, just wondering what in the world is going on. But here you can see those parts of their business where the biggest negative impact came. 86% saying business operations were disrupted. 85% saying projected revenue would be negatively impacted. 4 out of 5 talking about payroll and employment, and 3 out of 4 talking about negative effects on supply chain, working capital, and cash. And I wanted to turn first to Cameron about and say, as this pandemic has unfolded, what has happened to the Cameron Mitchell business?
Well, Tom, I've never seen anything like it in my life. On March 3rd, I was meeting with my bankers and going over the start of our year. We had a record start to the year. Our same-store sales were up 8%, which is industry leading. Going into that meeting, I was laying out our growth plans for the year and into 21, and I did it all. I said, this is subject to what the impact of the coronavirus is. And 17 days later, our $325 million a year company was down to zero. We got shut down in a matter of 4 days. And so we've been in zero revenue for the past 6 weeks, and we're anticipating opening about a quarter of our restaurants next week for carry out delivery. And anxiously awaiting the rollout plans and the opening plans from many governors across the country to see about how we can start back dining in the restaurants and at what level and so forth. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now within our business.
Have you tried to do the, order online, pick up and take it home to eat, that sort of option that some restaurants have done, or have you avoided that?
No, well, we tried it for a few days in some of our restaurants right at the very beginning, but we ran into problems with a lot of people wanting to come to work and so forth. And we thought it was best just to shut down for the time being and get our people on government benefits and keep them safe at home. And so we really shut down our entire operations with the exception of about 6 people here in the home office, just keeping the company staying afloat. I actually used the term, we put the company to sleep. And now we're just beginning the process of reawakening our company.
I can only imagine the intensity of the emotion and the feeling of the question of safety as well as the question of operations. And how did that thinking come out and show up in the way you were reacting in that first couple of weeks?
Well, I think it became most apparent with safety for our people. We didn't know at the time how bad this was going to be. We just knew we were facing government shutdowns, and we could have stayed open on a skeleton staff and so forth. But we just felt at that time it was best to we had no idea if we're going to lose money, if it was just going to exacerbate our issues, et cetera. So we just took the conservative route and just decided to close down completely. And we feel now we've seen enough evidence out there with our restaurant brethren around the country that a lot of restaurateurs are doing pretty good with carry out and delivery. They're not making money. We don't anticipate to make money necessarily, but we'll stem some of our losses along the way and also prepare the restaurants for actual reopening when that time comes here, hopefully in the next few weeks. So we're making the educated guess right now to begin the ramp back up process, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that as we get further into this discussion. But Kevin, I wanted to go to you because you've got stores too, different part of the country, different businesses. I guess by definition, Powersports vehicles are takeout. But what was the impact in those early weeks on your business?
Well, I think a lot like Cameron, where in February I was in San Diego on a YPO forum meeting with a group of guys, 9 or 10 other guys that are in the aerospace industry, the automobile industry, commercial development. And we literally were all sitting around talking about just how good things had started. I mean, the first of the year, January, February, were just doing really well for everybody. We were talking about what's the black swan that could change that. Really didn't see or feel anything. And the week of March 16th, I remember that Monday starting to really feel like, okay, something serious is going on out there. And I started to hear about Apple stores completely shutting down and other things. And so we started asking a lot of questions. By that Tuesday, we had our leadership team come together here in the office, and we started to hear more about states shutting down and what that would look like. And we grew concerned very quickly. We kind of went into a phase 1. What does that look like? Are we going to be shut down? We were actually deemed an essential business because we service and sell vehicles to police departments, fire departments, and farmers and ranchers and those types of things. So we started to get a sense that we may be able to stay open, but we ended up basically coming to a phase 1 plan that was going to, we had to let go of about 49 people. We started bracing for the very worst of what we thought was about to happen, and we could see sales over that week starting to slow. So fast forward, March was off for our business about 20-something%. We stopped all outbound going checks.
Well, that's 20-something%, but it was really only about the 20%, but the impact was only in the last 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, only in the last 2 weeks.
Right.
And we, in that week of March 16th, we stopped all outbound going checks. We let go of 49 people. We started coming up with remote working for our corporate office. I mean, we really started to make tough decisions very quickly. It was an emotional week. It was a roller coaster. At the end of March, when we looked at the results, they weren't terrible because we had a strong start. I told my teams the month of April, we need a brace for the worst. We're going to have to start modeling 30% down in revenues, maybe 40% down. What's a phase two? How many more people we have to get rid of? Well, sitting here today, I can tell you that we have had the biggest April in the company's history. We've had our two biggest Saturdays in the company's history, and our lead volume and online activity with our business it's hard to even understand with what's going on right now in the world, because I talk to so many other people who are impacted, and we are on fire.
So it sort of went like,
yes,
like a shape like that, dropped very suddenly and abruptly, and then turned right around.
So I think we're benefiting greatly because everything else is closed.
Yeah.
And people aren't able to go, on vacation and do other activities. And just the products that we do sell are stuff that people can do as a family and social distance and get out and get away from all this.
Yeah. Michael,
so I think we're seeing the benefit of that.
Yeah. Michael, how about you? I think your performance is sort of in the middle, right?
It is. So we also started the year pretty strongly, and we had a good 2019. And then as the week of March 16th happened, when the shutdown started to happen in Pennsylvania, and I'll never forget it, March 16th happens to be my birthday. So I'll always remember this birthday. And during that birthday week, we started immediately setting up a team internally to check with all of our customers, because just because we were open didn't mean that all of our customers would be open. And what we discovered within a week is that about 30% of our customers were closed. So we immediately went from 100% of our capacity, or what we were, we're doing on a daily basis, to 70%. So we started planning, what do we do in order to deal with that going forward? And we developed immediately a COVID-19 task force within the company that was a cross-functional team to go after, to talk to our bankers right away, see where their heads were at, talk to our suppliers right away, see where their heads were at, and since we're a part of the supply chain, make sure that we're managing the entire supply chain and our piece within it. So that's what we were focused on in the first couple of weeks, along with, at the same time, how do we keep our people safe? Because just because we're deemed life essential, what does that mean if people are scared to come to work? And so we started right away with searching around for what are the best practices to keep our team safe. And so we turned out we're a little bit ahead of the governor. So we started having people wear masks about 2 weeks before they were recommended. We started thermometer checks before they were recommended. We started the distancing, which was everybody was talking about, but we literally were putting tape on the floor next to workstations to identify for people what that meant. We even toyed with the idea, didn't actually do, of taping a couple of yardsticks together so people could carry them around and make sure they were far enough apart. Mm-hmm. But we were really reinforcing it, and we're open 24/7. So we're running 3 shifts, 7 days a week. So all of that was going on at the same time. On the flip side, we actually got some upticks in demand from people that are more in demand right now, like food and beverage.
Michael, your microphone has gone out. I can't hear you. I'm not, why don't we figure, but I'll tell you, well, let's come back to that while Michael gets his voice back. There we go.
Sorry. Am I back?
You're back. Yep.
Okay.
Now you're gone again. I don't know what it is. The perils.
Am I back now?
You're good.
Okay. Well, you can go over to the next question and I'll catch up.
All right, good. So what was interesting is that one of the things you see here is we see three very different portraits, right? You see Cameron Mitchell shutting everything down. You see Michael still running 3 shifts, but 70% of operations go. And I think we'll hear later that also he started doing new things and creating some new kinds of products that he mentioned. We're in the plastics extrusion business, so we mentioned things for food and beverage, but I think there's some other things we talked about. We also saw Kevin, and there may also be some interesting regional differences here. We saw Kevin with a big drop, and we didn't really get to questions of supply, and maybe we can get to that. But one of the things that we saw in our overall study again, was that people looking at this time at the end of March said, whoa, whatever my growth projections were, I have no idea what they are now. When we asked these guys in December, what are you expecting from 2020? On average, they said they were going to grow 5%. And they said on average, they're going to increase their payrolls by 3.5%. And now, as you can see, 3 out of 4 said that growth will decline, the growth rate will decline. They don't know. We didn't ask them how much because frankly, they didn't know, right? And 2 out of 3 said that employment would shrink. So that was a question about that. And they also said that they were going to pull investment plans off the table. Half of them said they were going to expand into a new market domestically or internationally. And now 70% say, not so fast. We're going to pull back. Maybe they'll stop. Maybe they'll just delay. Similarly, about 1 in 3 said that they expected to open a new plant or facility. And now 2 out of 3 say, we're going to delay it. Again, we might do it, but it's on hold. And Kevin, what have you seen in terms of the way your investment plans and your growth plans, have you delayed things? What are you doing about what happened to all those plans that you were talking about at the YPO meeting? Have you put them on the table, or are you bringing them back off?
So we were actually had an LOI on a pretty large dealer group, probably the 5th largest in the country. We're the 2nd largest in our industry.
Uh-huh.
And we have been working on it for about 2 years, and we've pushed pause. I mean, we've asked them if they were interested in a COVID-19 discount. We were going to start cutting valuations and things of that nature. They were not interested at this time. They were just going to work to get, weather the storm, and they feel like that things will come back in Q3, Q4, and then we'll kind of connect again then. But yeah, we've pushed pause on everything other than 2 construction projects that were already, one was about 40% through completion, the other one was about 60%. So we want to finish those projects, but other than that, we're going to hang out for a little while.
Michael, what about you? Did you have plans that you've put aside or taken off the table, or?
So a little bit of tale of 2 worlds. We put a hold on CapEx, but we've invested more in digital marketing. What we're seeing is that more, because, and this is, the data's all out there, more and more people are home, and when they're not watching Netflix, they're reading, they're researching stuff for work. And it allows us in a very empathetic way to give them information and solutions about the kinds of stuff that we can provide in the different industries that we're interested in. So, so that's an area that we're actually almost tripling the amount of investment in marketing over the plan for over the next 3 to 6 months, where people are spending more time on websites than ever before, more time on landing pages, more time reading ebooks and white papers and that kind of thing, which is, our sales cycle tends to be long because our projects tend to last for 5 years, but they often take 9 months to a year to get the project going. So finding the time for somebody to actually read some stuff and then call us is actually happening.
So less sales, more marketing.
Yes.
And in the marketing, a different marketing mix. A, more digital, but B, more solutions oriented, more thought leader. I mean,
yeah, it's more
characterize
around
that a little bit. Yeah, and maybe
it's more around a couple of things. For our existing customers, we're doing a weekly check-in. Here's where we are, because the rules keep changing, and how are you guys doing? Not asking for anything.
A friend of mine calls them love calls.
Exactly.
We just call you, how are you? Yeah.
Exactly. And then for the people that we might want to generate leads for, we have a lot of content because we've been doing digital marketing for a decade now, and so we're repurposing that content to say, first, up front, we know times are tough. We know that we're going to get through this, and because we're going to get through this, here are some ways. And our approach is, we think you're going to have to do more with less. We think every company is going to have to do more with less, with rare exception. Maybe Amazon is an exception. Maybe Kevin's an exception. But I think every other company is going to have to do more with less. And so we focus the marketing message around what we could provide to help you do more with less, so that when you're ready, we're there for you.
And Cameron, in your it sounds to me like plans to expand have also been put on the shelf. How have you thought about, what you were planning to do and what you're now planning to do? How will you make decisions going forward about how to expand and whether to expand?
Well, listen, we've had a track record of year-over-year growth for 27 years, and we'll continue to develop restaurants. However, we were actually pretty fortunate. We just came off a big round of development, and we were just getting ready to launch another big round, but had not finalized some deals and so forth. So we're able to kind of suspend our development temporarily. And quite frankly, we're going to look at it differently going forward. We think we were one of the leading restaurant companies out there in the country, at least from the private side. And we think there's going to be different development opportunities post-COVID-19 that necessarily weren't there before, or maybe are a little less traditional. So we're excited about the future, quite frankly. We just need to get through this, and then we'll get back on to our development strategy once we get through this, and probably won't think about it till we get into next year and get everybody vaccinated and really feel the economy's on the mend. But we think we'll have more development opportunities than we could handle going forward at some point.
More and different, you say.
Yes.
Without giving away any state secrets, can you describe how you think they might be different?
Well, it could be a restaurant company that's been struggling, owned by a private equity firm or something, and they want us to take it over and operate it. It could be an opportunity like that. It could be some restaurant spaces that had closed down that we'll be able to see and be able to get into it at a much lesser price, the hermit crab situation where we're taking someone else's restaurant over. So we know the development opportunities are going to abound. I'm not worried about that. It's, in fact, I'm quite confident that it's more of the short term of getting through. We think we're going to have to open up on limited capacity and so forth, and just making sure we are profitable and we live to fight another day and get to the other side of this.
Gotcha. So things are on hold.
Mm-hmm.
And in all cases here, a deal that was going to be done, well, the seller you can't be sure of the seller's value, and the seller can't be sure of their value, so that's on hold. In all of these cases, looking for, and I love the hermit crab metaphor, because I suspect you can think about that for more than real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Think about there may be other sorts of shells that one can come in and occupy if one is one of those companies that survives with profitability and survives with, dare we say it, access to capital, which may be a critical issue. Actually, all of you have sounded like capital is not a problem. Is that, obviously working capital is a problem, cash is a problem, but are you counting yourselves lucky in terms of capitalization? Did you do the right things? Do you know competitors who are really struggling in terms of capital? How would you take a look at that part of the balance sheet?
I'll jump in here. It's interesting because if you would have talked to me in November of 2019 in this current situation with COVID, our organization would be in a much different place. I just finished a large refinance with a traditional lender, got out of some expensive mezzanine debt with guys that, they don't play ball. And we've been working on that for quite some time. And our balance sheet changed dramatically in November. And then we had a strong season coming in, and we're doing some other things with a refinance of some mortgages, some floor plan refinance, really trying to continue to strengthen up our balance sheet. We just put some more equity on the balance sheet during that refinance. And so coming into this situation, we are better capitalized, more healthy, better relationship with local lenders, relationship lenders. And then at the same time, we did apply for all the relief programs and got a substantial amount of money in relief. And then all of our manufacturers of these products have really stepped up in a big way to help us with some of our biggest expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So we are very well capitalized, actually have a lot of liquidity, more than we've ever had. But because of our relationship and the health of our balance sheet, I think that lending or, getting access to capital is just not going to be a problem for us right now.
Yeah, Michael, Cameron, you guys all right? I want to move to the next question, but I was just struck by that. And it sounds like, Kevin, like you got, Lackey got lucky in terms of timing.
Timing, dude.
In really good shape.
Well, all I was going to say to that, Tom, is that you don't start saving for a rainy day when it's raining. And so part of our long-term approach has been stay under-leveraged so that you have access whenever you might need it. And so in addition to all the things that Kevin did, we've also applied for PPP and been successful. We're thinking about applying for Main Street lending just to have more access than we might ever need. But it is hard to do. If you have to start doing that in the middle of a crisis, it tends to be a problem.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, we did a study of access to capital in the middle market a few years ago, and aversion to getting out over your skis is characteristic of middle market companies. And that they, obviously they're private equity firms and they may have a more ownerships and they may have more highly leveraged balance sheets, but there's a real concern about, I don't want my nut to get so big that I worry about making it every month or every quarter or whenever I have to. So that sounds good. So the third thing we found, and we talked about access to cash here, but we also looked at the impact, we looked at projections and plans, and then we looked at where executives found their own problems hardest to manage. Not necessarily the worst problems, but the problems where they felt they had the least leverage on them. And this was sort of interesting. The biggest challenge that companies had, they said, was, or the challenge where they felt least effective, was in supply chain, and then cash and working capital, then customer experience operations. And the good news is that IT and communications seem to be in pretty good shape. Thank goodness for that. But there's a really interesting issue here. I'm looking at these numbers. I sort of think I've got my operations, remember, were my biggest hit, but at least they're within my four walls. I can kind of manage them, but supply chain is outside. Cash and working capital, I may have less control over, and customer experience, less control over. I mean, as you look at these, Kevin, you're in the middle of a supply chain, both upstream and downstream, and and you were talking about your customers here. Talk to me about where you struggle the most to try to gain traction.
So I think, we had to make quick adjustments. I think, Michael has, said very much to the safety and the health of our teams. In March, at the end of March, we kind of were seeing what's going on. When we found out we were deemed an essential business, we had to start managing what the essential business means. Meaning, how can we interact with the customers? We are a retail business where customers are coming through the door. And so we had to start putting plans in place to protect our customers and to protect our teams. And I think that was a real challenge because every county that we're in has had very different, guidelines. But we wanted to deem for ourselves, even if a county was a little bit more loose than another county, what do we have to do to protect our teams? And so we started putting tape on the floors to keep people from the counters, and we went to one door in the dealerships that are open so that someone was watching that door. We went to appointment only. We went to delivery of vehicles. So now all of a sudden, we're not Amazon. So in 2.5, 3 weeks, we went into this delivery mode. How do we deliver products to people, do curbside drop-offs for service people? So we really had to work through that. Then we also had to go through our budget and say, well, this is what we prepared for. We've ordered inventory to do this much revenue, and we usually have anywhere from 3 months to 6 months of supplies of vehicles on the ground. And so we started looking at what these revenues, if they start falling 30-40%, what does that look like? Well, the manufacturers started closing their facilities. They started closing manufacturing, and they started cutting back orders by 50%, 60%. Some of them just stopped orders completely. Well, now we're seeing our revenues grow, and I don't think it's sustainable. I do think it's a surge, but we're seeing our revenues grow, and now we think we're gonna run out of inventory.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the old beer game thing where the wholesaler and the retailer and the factory have communications issues. Michael, what about you in this whole area of what's toughest to manage?
Yeah, well, what I'll put, I think, with at least my interpretation of supply chain is what I'll call the 50 different state shutdown orders, and what that means, and the ripple effects from them. So on the very local level, the ripple effect is getting PPE for your people because you can't open without PPE, and so fortunately, because of in my position in the chamber, I was able to find people who were retooling their own operations to make masks, to make other PPE that we could acquire, because just going online, forget it. Like, the hospital systems were gobbling everything up, as was the federal government, as is still largely happening. So the rest of the supply chain is working okay because we're getting raw materials from a very challenged industry, being the petroleum industry, because plastics are mostly made out of petroleum. They're happy to sell what they can because their other sales are down, dramatically. So we're able to obtain those materials pretty easily, the raw materials. I think the next challenge will be testing, because it's, as more people go out into the world, then it's going to be every different jurisdiction is trying to set up its own testing regimen to allow people to work, to allow people to interact, and to allow people to do different kinds of business. And so we'll see what that looks like. But at the moment, we can't get any testing for our people, as an example. We're just monitoring them by taking their temperature every day, and asking them to self-report if they feel sick. Yeah.
Hey, Cameron, in your area, obviously the customer experience is challenged when there are no customers coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But again, in this whole area, you've got, I imagine that the whole restaurant supply business itself that you have relied on and will rely on is in a state of tremendous chaos or confusion. Mm-hmm. And as you look forward to recovery and reopening and look at what's happening to your suppliers, are you looking at this now? Are you trying to get hypotheses about what things are going to look like in July, September, October? How are you looking at those supply chains for yourself?
Well, up until literally a couple of days ago, we felt very good about our supply chain. If you've seen on the news, Tyson and some of these meat processing plants closing down, starting to impact the supply chain. We do know it's basically about 2 weeks for them to ramp up to be able to service us on their side, and that's starting to stretch a little bit. We're planning a phased reopening starting next week, so initial indications are we're fine, but I'm worried as these restaurants reopen, there might be a little bit of a lull or a little bit of gap in there. But at that point, then we rely on our great supplier relationships that we have to make sure we're taken care of as one of their larger customers. So I think we're going to be okay, but I have recently moved from 100% confident in our supply chain to less than 75% here, and we're starting to investigate if that's really going to be impactful for us or not.
It's interesting. I think all of us on the retail food consumption thing have discovered, and it's not just in paper products, sort of weird stockouts. Mm-hmm. Oh, what? No Brussels sprouts. Suddenly they've disappeared in odd places from the market, obviously yeast and flour and things like that, but other sorts of weirdness. And that may be something coming forward with signature dishes suddenly lack a signature ingredient because that part isn't coming back.
Correct.
Which sort of leads to this interesting question about the resilience and comeback. And we have some great questions lining up, so I want to get to them, but I want to quickly get a canvas of thought from you guys about what you see. We asked companies, remember this was the end of March, how long will it be when this fades before you can be back at full capacity? And here's the spread. What was interesting is that about 40% said that they would be back. They thought they could be back at full capacity, whatever that was. That might be, a shrunken capacity within a month. 80%, a little more than 80%, said that they thought that they would be back within 6 months or less. And as you can see, 20%, 1 out of 5 said it would take 7 to 12 months or more than a year. As you guys are looking forward, what are you seeing? I mean, Kevin, you've sort of seen that you're already back. Is that but what are you seeing as the biggest obstacles, I guess, to getting back on track?
Well, I think that we're going to hear at 2:30 Central Standard Time today from the governor of Texas, and they're going to start talking about how to reopen other businesses that were deemed non-essential. I think that we will immediately, within the next week, be back at what is full capacity, opening our showroom floors and things like that. You know, my biggest challenge or concern is it's still managing the safetiness and the safety and the health of our teams, the people showing up. I mean, we have frontline employees, just like grocery store workers and other things, because they are there doing retail with people now. So I think managing that, but I'm really truly more concerned of not how to fully reopen, but just what the lasting impacts of the unemployment rates and, you know, all the things that are going on with the economy, stock market, oil prices.
Unemployment, there's demand, there's recession. You're more concerned with recession than the immediate aftermath of
Absolutely. At this point, that is absolutely what we're concerned about, not being able to reopen our business.
Cameron, what about you? Are you seeing a similar? You mentioned suppliers, and you've also got a lot of restaurants.
Yeah, because of the nature of our business
reopen cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, because of the nature of our business, Tom, I'm on the bottom of that curve. I don't expect our business to be back to 100% anytime until we have vaccination across the country and COVID is behind us. We hope to get to, between delivery and modified openings, we hope to get to 70% of our sales, somewhere in that ballpark. I'm worried about the entire economy, obviously, and unemployment, et cetera, where that has helped us. I would say prior to COVID-19, we had huge wage inflation and shortage of workers, and we were scrambling. Huge overtime every week because we didn't have enough workers. And we think that is one of the silver linings in this whole thing, that when we do come back, that problem will be over for us for at least some period of time, or a lengthy period of time, and a reset, if you will. But it's going to be a while for us before people feel totally comfortable shoulder to shoulder, table to table in a restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem, those 260 companies, when we asked them in December what their number one problem was, it was finding talent.
Right.
And so what you're saying is also borne out across all kinds of sectors. Michael, where would you put yourself in this chart? What do you see as the biggest challenge going forward?
I mean, I think that full capacity, echoing some of the comments that were made, is at least 18 months out. I think we're going to see new normal 2.0 for those of us who, I think everyone in this call remembers the Great Recession. I think we're talking Great Recession and then some for the next year to 18 months. When we remember that consumer confidence is what drives 70% of our economy, and we've seen the biggest shock to consumer confidence in the history of the last 100 years. We're going to see unemployment in double digits for a fair period of time. That means no matter what business you're in, you're going to see a decline in net demand. So while we're manufacturing parts, the end uses might be home building. Well, home building is going to go down if less people can afford homes. So there'll be some exceptions to that. We're working on a big project right now where we may be making test kits for a global pharmaceutical company for the next couple of years. So that'll offset some of that because of the needs, as Cameron was talking about. We're going to need to test everybody and vaccinate everybody, and that'll be part of the cycle going forward. But the winners will not do enough to create demand for the overall employment base that is going to take time to rebuild. And so I'm in that 7% on this chart, which is we're nowhere going to be near full capacity unless you artificially reduce your capacity. And I can reduce my capacity and be at full capacity, but pre-COVID capacity, I don't think we're going to be at as a nation for a while, with some notable exceptions: Netflix, Amazon, maybe even banking, because you're gonna need to help some people. But I think overall, we're gonna have double-digit inflation through the end of next year.
And double-digit inflation, unemployment.
I'm sorry, unemployment.
Yeah, unemployment. Yeah. So what it's interesting, you're sort of talking about two things, and we're going to take some of these questions that have come in right now, and Doug should chew up. We're seeing two things. One is like there's the impact of the epidemic, both short-term and long-term, right? And long-term includes testing and vaccination and the restoration of confidence about being willing to sit at a restaurant next to other people, go to a sporting event or whatever you might do. And then there's the other economic impact of just unemployment, slowdowns, housing. And so we've got sort of, I guess a vicious circle going down and a slow build back up that in which each of these is dependent upon the other to go forward a step with one, forward a step with the other. And the fact that there is that sort of two-step may make it more complicated unless they really start going, which Doug, we've got some questions, and why don't you, can you sort of tell us what we've got and be the MC on this as we come to the last 15 minutes of this discussion?
Yeah, sure, Tom. We've got a number of questions submitted. The first one is for Cameron. So Cameron, you mentioned the slow return to in-restaurant dining, but you also mentioned delivery as a new option. How are you envisioning off-premise kind of in the post-COVID world?
Well, that's a good question. So one of the things we don't really know the answer yet, we've likened this approach we've taken where we've been shut down for a while and we can watch our brethren out there and see their results. So we feel like we have a pretty good forecast of what we're going to do going forward. But the big question will become is we know delivery and carry out will be a larger portion of our business going forward, but what will it be once the dining rooms reopen and so forth? So we look at launching these restaurants for carry out and takeout and curbside as a precursor for the new norm when they do actually get open to limited seating capacity, et cetera. So, but we're talking about doing things that we never did do before, like family meals or meal kits or any of those things that will have a whole breadth of different things. We know one of our operator friend of ours does 1/3 of his carry out, traditional carry out, another third is meal kits, and another third is raw product or prepared family meals. The other third is raw product for at-home cooking and preparation and so forth. So we know we're going to have to move on our feet and think pretty quickly along the way, but we've got some good guidance from our other operator friends that are out there doing it right now as we move forward.
The next question for Michael and Kevin. Do you see mid to long-term opportunities that are emerging for your business as a result of this crisis and disruption, or are you really just focusing more on the short-term wins right now?
I see some mid and long-term opportunities around testing and PPE. We've, for example, on Friday, designed and started molding our own swabs, which we're testing with a local Philadelphia hospital. And I think that you're going to see, like you've seen, some reshoring of manufacturing over the last decade because prices in China have gone up over time, and long supply chains have their own challenges. I think you're going to see like you have for the defense industry, a healthcare industry buy American requirement and certainly bias over the next 3 to 5 years. And so we're going to use those abilities to do that for testing kits and for related PPE that we can make components for to use that over the mid and long term. And I think that's at some level here to stay. Not the surge, kind of like Kevin, we're going to see a surge on some things now over the next year or so. But if you can imagine, like everybody on this call, they're testing for the flu, the regular flu every year. Millions of test kits are built every year. We do some of them. So the COVID-19 is going to be another test that has to be done. So it's, you're going to have those kinds of things that are just going to be recurring around PPE. You're going to have some stockpiling within hospitals. Pandemic preparedness will go up over the next 3 to 5 years across the world, because once it's happened, the good and the bad is we're always fighting the last war. And so we're going to fight this last war for a while, and we're going to see some opportunities there.
Yeah, for us, I think that we're going to see a couple opportunities. One, our industry is it's set up ripe for consolidation right now, has been for the last 2 or 3 years. Still a lot of mom and pop one-off dealerships all over the country. So I see a lot of dealerships not making it through this, which there's probably more than what needs to be out there. So it's going to clean up the industry a little bit, which I hate to say, but I think it will. And then there's going to be consolidation opportunities. And then for our products, I think that there's actually going to be this surge, but then I do think that we will maintain probably and fare better than most. And so we're thinking about those long-term opportunities versus the short-term wins, because to Cameron's point of his business, it's going to be a long time before the restaurant business or industry gets back to normal, before people go to concerts or people are traveling the way that they did 45 days ago. And the products we sell are just something that people can get out to the state parks, go out trails, go out on the lakes, go out, go out motorcycle riding and things like that. So I think that we're going to see a benefit from everything going on long term, because more people are going to get driven to our industry as a result of not being able to do some of these other activities.
Next question is for the group. How has your company culture helped during this crisis, and possibly how has it changed?
I can jump on that. Our company culture is our #1 calling card, and so it's alive and well. I think we have communicated very well with our people. We have, it's like everybody's doing weekly Zoom calls with all different aspects of our teams, communication, letters, etc. But I tell our people, now's the time when you lean on your company culture and your values the hardest. So ours is alive and well, and I would say ours is thriving right now, even in the difficult situation we find ourselves in. I think it's alive and well.
I can echo Cameron. We started on a system 2.5 years ago, called EOS. That's Entrepreneurial Operating System. And basically, we started with a coach that's walked us through 2.5 years of this system that we're on, and it's around our mission, values, core values. It's around meeting cadence and pulse. It's around scorecards, and it's brought our entire company that's spread out all over the country, between operations, accounting, HR, marketing, and etc., so tightly woven together in our communication and the metrics that we're measuring, that we could have never been as prepared for this as we are right now as a company. And as a result of that, and the fact that people are concerned and we're still making things happen, our company's culture right now, the activity is just it's exciting. I mean, they're thriving when other people are not. And so anyway, the company culture in our business right now is it's strong and alive.
Yeah, and I would say for us, our company culture is around innovation and problem solving for over 60 years. And so when this problem hit, one of the things I'm proudest of is that when we moved 1/3 of the workforce home, within 4 days they were up and running, and we haven't missed a beat. And they're optimistic and upbeat about it. And I think that, and this is a subset of people who are finding a way through, is that when you have the ability to see your way through, your teams feel that, and they feed off of it. And so there's clearly a lot of suffering happening out there. Before the official call started, we talked about some of the losses of life that we've all personally experienced with friends and family. So that's happening out there. It's staggering numbers, and it's having a staggering psychological effect on people. But within our own organizations, I think what we've been able to do is lean on our people and give them structure, which I think in a time of crisis helps them to have stuff to do.
Guys, in some cases, when in a crisis time, often bosses have an instinct to tighten the leash and to sort of say, versus to encourage empowerment or innovation. And there's sort of a trade-off. How have you guys played that question of control versus individual initiative as a cultural dynamic during this period?
I mean, my bias always has been something I've referred to as strategic laziness. I don't love micromanaging. I think that if you hire, my job is to hire the best people and trust them to do it and find ways to check in as appropriate. And so we've built our company that way. And so that continues now, or they're home. I'm not worried that they're home because I can tell that the work's getting done and trust them. So, but that may be different in a restaurant environment where you got a lot more things. But that's my approach.
Yeah, we're the same. I think the only thing that has changed since the week of March 16th is that we're having more frequent and in-depth communication. So absolutely want every one of my leadership team to be running their aspects of the business. But I did bring myself into more frequent and more detailed communication. So we're doing calls twice a day, 6 days a week, and they're very detailed. And at this point, they've kind of become redundant because so many things have been executed and taken place. But in those first 3 to 5 weeks, I think that was critical.
Doug, we probably have time for one more, yeah?
Yeah, we've got one more question. It's also for the group. So what resources are your organizations using for guidance, support, ideas, and so forth during this time?
Well, I'm leaning on our Chamber of Commerce. We have a pretty good network because we have the Middle Market Action Team. It's about 100 companies within that team, and we're sharing what we're doing with each other and how to, make the things safer, how to get simple things. How do you buy thermometers? Where can you get them? All those things. We're on all the little details of that. So that's been my go-to resource. I've also found the COVID resource page on the Chamber's website to have you a lot of links to a lot of places. And that may be true in all the chambers around the country, but obviously I'm dealing with Philadelphia, and that's what I've been doing.
For me, we're using Chamber has been very helpful. We're using our peer groups and our industry from the operations side, and using industry dealer councils to talk to the manufacturers and try to continue to lean on them. And then for me, I use my YPO group. It's a peer group of other industries, but trying to stay connected to as many people as I know that are working through different aspects of how to manage their business differently, or the relief funding, or state and local guidance and things like that. So really it's constant communication. I think it's probably 12 or 13 hours a day of constant communication by text, email, and phone calls right now with different sources.
I would, Kevin is exactly what I'm doing. Carbon copy, I'm in YPO, same thing. Our industry, my peers, et cetera, et cetera. It's almost, it's calming down, but there's almost too much communication for a while there. I couldn't read as many, I'm on so many calls, and I couldn't, with industry, I couldn't read it as much as I needed to read, et cetera. And it's starting to settle down a little bit. I think people are starting to overall have a better handle on their business and what's going on with COVID and where we are and so forth. But in the beginning, I think everybody knows how fluid the situation was in those first 3-4 weeks. Was crazy. And it seems to me to be settling down just a bit.
So it's interesting, when one of that first slides I showed that 51% of people said their biggest problem was just, as you said, Cameron, the situation was so fluid, trying to make sense of it. And what I think we've heard from the three of you is different kinds of sense making, right? You're looking at, making a decision, in your case, Cameron, to shut the thing down, let's put it to sleep for a while and watch, and maybe let some other people make mistakes, but then we'll get organized and we'll watch it, and we'll start thinking, even when we start thinking about new business models, we don't want to necessarily, we want to get a second user advantage, a second mover advantage, and the benefit of hindsight of that rather than first mover advantage.
Correct.
And Kevin, again, shutting things out or closing things down and then watching very careful and then having a surge to respond to that was sort of unexpected. While Michael, you're looking at, customers who are out of business, looking upstream and downstream, and also thinking about how do we, as an essential business, keep operating safely in a manufacturing environment, a little different from the environment you, Kevin, had, but there was those elements, trying to get a first sort of sense of stasis and where we are, a lot of communication. And what I'm interested in hearing is the communication is upstream and downstream for all of you. It's to peer groups. It's with resource centers like the chambers, and my goodness, it's with your people at all levels to try to make them feel safe. And also, even though some of them are furloughed in many cases, make them realize that you're going to bring them back. Or when you come back, this is not a good time to make enemies, right? This is a good time to get a sense of the environment. And each of you in these three very different industries pulling together what look like, plans to go forward at different rates, different paces, opening up as you can, as the regulations allow, but also as the psychology and demand allow in order to come back from this in the best possible shape. With that, we're at the top of the hour. Cameron Mitchell, Michael Araten, Kevin Lackey. I think one of the things that you've done is you've provided for the several hundred people listening to this also an opportunity to see your brains and to learn from your experience, just as you've been learning from the experience of friends and colleagues. This will be posted in the next day on our website, this webinar. You'll find more COVID-19 resources, including the research paper that I talked about on our website, the URL of which is here, www.middlemarketcenter.org. And Cameron Mitchell, Michael Araten, Kevin Lackey, thank you very much. And thank you, all of you for joining us for this webinar.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Nice
Doug.
to meet y'all too.
You too, guys. Good luck.
Good
Be
luck.
well. Be safe.
Stay safe.